There is a secret formula in trading, which is time, price, and direction. Imagine if you knew the exact time the market was going to move at, the exact price it was going to move from, and the exact direction it was going to move in. Trading would be easy, right? But unfortunately, as we all know, trading is difficult, and that is because we cannot know any of these for sure. But what we can do is our due diligence before the market is even open to make sure we've gone through a checklist and we've searched for all of the different factors which can affect the market in that particular day. In this video, we're going to be focusing on direction, but if you'd like to see a future video on time and price, then make sure to comment time and price in the comments below. And if you're excited to learn about directional bias choosing, then hit the thumbs up button before we get started.
So the first thing that I want to say is that you always want to be aware that no matter how many checks that you do before the market opens, there's always the possibility that something is happening which you don't know about yet. So for example, if there is a meeting going on that is going to affect the markets, you will actually see the move in the markets before the news hits the mainstream media. So even though you've done all of the checks, you still want to just be aware that you can be wrong and to always use the stop loss, because you're never going to be able to know everything that's going on. So the checks that I do before the market is open is the economical calendar, the earnings reports. I do a Google search for the things which are most likely to affect the markets. I also do a bit of technical analysis on a higher time frame. So even though I trade on the 1 minute chart, I'm looking at daily momentum, daily price action, and there's also an indicator which I like to use to help me with my directional bias. So for the first check is economical calendar. I put this first because economical data and what's going on in the world will actually override everything else. So even if all of your technical analysis indicators are pointing you in one direction, if some huge piece of news is coming out or if something big's happening in the world, that will usually always override everything else. So I look at the economical calendar first on Thinkmarkets. I'm mainly looking at high impact, and as I trade the US indices in the New York session, I'm mostly interested in the US dollar. However, you will obviously have to check whichever countries you are trading. And if you're trading Forex, you'll have to check 2 different countries. And also be aware as to how the news will affect the different markets that you're trading. So for example, the US dollar and the US stock market tend to move in opposite directions. So if I'm looking at the US dollar on here, how this is going to affect the US dollar, I'm actually having to think about the US stock market as being the opposite. So if I see something as being good for the US dollar, I interpret that as being potentially bad for the US stock market. Similarly, if you're trading Forex, remember that the currency which is listed first is the one that sets the direction. So if you're trading pound dollar, the pound will set the direction, which means if something is good for the US dollar, it may be bad for pound dollar. I also do a Google search of Trump and the Fed, because as I trade the US indices, anything that's going on with Trump or the Fed is likely to have a huge impact on those markets. If you don't trade the US indices like me, then you'll need to just do a Google search on whatever factors affect the markets that you trade the most. And I also check the earnings reports for the companies which make up the US indices. They release their earnings every quarter. So I'll just check how they did each day. Some days there's nothing at all, then other days there's 4 or 5. Another little trick that I like to do is when a company has released their earnings, I'll not only look at the percentage surprise, whether it's positive or negative and how much so, but I will also Google search that company. And the reason for this is a number might look good on paper, but the companies will always release a press release on the day of their earnings reports. And often you can get a lot more detail about future projections from that report. For example, if the company reported 3% surprise earnings, that sounds good on paper, but they may have put in their news release that they're expecting sales to drop over the next quarter, in which case that would be perceived badly by the market. So even though I'm trading on the 1 minute chart, I do a lot of my technical analysis before the market opens and my directional bias choosing on the 1 day chart. So the first thing I'm looking at is daily momentum. So we go to the day chart and I use Heikin Ashi to check the momentum. So I go from normal candlesticks to Heikin Ashi, and this shows me three different options. It shows me either bullish momentum, bearish momentum, or indecisive momentum. The green candles with a flat base and only wick at the top show bullish momentum. The red candles with a flat top and only wick at the base show bearish momentum. And the candles which have wick at the top and at the base, they can be either color, but they show indecisive momentum. So as we are usually looking at the momentum before the market's opened, it means that we actually have to go one to the left to take the reading, because the candle which is on the right hand side is still forming. And as I'm trading in the New York session, it's only taken into account what's happened in London, and therefore we haven't actually got a full reading on it yet. So you usually go one to the left. So in this case, one to the left shows a bullish momentum candle, which gives me a little tick under bullish for daily momentum. The next thing I want to do is check daily price action. So I go back to normal candlesticks. On normal candlesticks, there's a few questions that you want to ask. And the first one is very easy. Am I in an uptrend, a downtrend, or in a range? Is the market going up, down, or sideways? And at the moment, it looks like it's going up. But there's also a few other factors that you want to put in. For example, have we just crossed an all-time high? And are we likely to retest that level? So even though it looks bullish because it's in an uptrend, are we likely to get a retest of a level anytime soon? You also want to look at the formation of the candlesticks. So are they candlesticks which are looking very certain? For example, do they have a high body to wick ratio? Or are there candles which are looking kind of uncertain with a lot more wick than body? The more indecisive the market is looking and the more indecisive your checks are coming out, the more you actually want to take a bit of a back seat and be cautious as the market opens. And finally, there is an indicator which I like to use. So I'm going to go back to the 1 minute chart, and the indicators on Think Trader are here under this little symbol. And the indicator that I like to use is called the VWAP. It stands for Volume Weighted Average Price. It looks a little bit like a moving average on the chart, but it also takes into account volume. So it gives greatest weighting to high volume. So very easily, I just look at it and it helps me to rule out trades in a certain direction. Therefore, once I've done all of my checks, I'm looking to see where the volume is in the market. If the market is above the VWAP, I am only allowed to look for buy positions. And if it's below the VWAP, I'm only allowed to look for sell positions.
So now you understand the basics of choosing a directional bias. Remember that you can never know all of the factors which are affecting the market. So always be prepared to be proved wrong by the market, and always make sure you have a stop loss in place. If you want to see a future video on time and price, don't forget to comment below time and price. And if you got some value out of this video, then give it a little thumbs up.